Hello, hello, creators. I hope everyone is well today. It has been an excellent weekend here in Canada. Beautiful, bright, sunny days of balmy 6 degrees Celsius for those who are in the winterlands. And then for those who have joined us elsewhere, welcome. Every week we brainstorm on Twitch with some delightful creators and um, try to work our way through everything from storytelling problems to interactive design to help unblock people where we can. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Emily Craven. I am a writer myself, but I also work as part of the production team at Story City. Story City is an app that allows anybody to make and sell interactive experiences that are only open in the right place. So you might be on a choose your own adventure where you're a pirate looking for pirate treasure. You might be on an escape room style puzzle trail where you have to solve a whole bunch of clues to get to the end of your story. Um, to being a platform that allows you to make scavenger hunts, walking tours, whatever it is you like. As long as the idea behind that is that it opens in the location that you set it within a city. So we meet here every Monday to uh, chat with whoever wants to brainstorm. We use Twitch Guest Star to be able to do that. And if no one wants to brainstorm live, that's fine. We have plenty of projects that we can work on in the meantime that you guys can kind of get a little bit of inspiration from. Hello, Marguerite. I see you're here again today. Nice to see you. Let me invite you into the guest star lounge, as it were. Beautiful. And if you are um, in the Twitch channel and you're interested in brainstorming um, stories as well, hit us up as a follower and let us know in the chat, and we'll add you in. Um, so while Marguerite's getting ready, she's one of our regulars who likes to come and brainstorm. Um, I will also bring up a project that we were working on last week too, where essentially we were attempting to adapt a piece of content that we already had, so that it could be an experience that could be played in any city. And um, the idea was it was an invasion story. You were attempting to stop an invasion of your city. It was meant to be a comedy. It was written essentially for Adelaide in Australia. And so we were attempting to adapt it such that it could be played in other cities. So we have that there as a backup to chat through if we wish. But in the meantime, hello, Marguerite. How are you today? Good to see you. Yeah. Good to see you. Um, how has your brainstorming been going this week? What fun questions do you have for us? Nice, congratulations.
And
Hmm. And so, so the question is, um, so you were speaking to this writer, or this writer has become a part of your team. Hmm. Hmm. So the walking stick is essentially kind of like a, it's more than just a walking aid. It is a part of the magic that happens with this story. Then, okay, and what does it result in? Does it result in kind of like miracles happening? Does it help in attaining knowledge? Like, how is it magical? Okay. And so, what was it about the story then that said to you, "Oh, this would be something that would be a great adaptation into like a scavenger hunt"? Like, what about the story um, gave you that vibe? Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
half an hour away from Paris.
Hmm. And so those experiences. So is this a nonfiction story, or I'm assuming it's a fiction story with a magical, um, if a magical walking stick is part of it. Mhm. And so when in the places that this character and also the author is visiting, are they all in a single city? Do they scatter themselves across an area? How close are they together? Like those kind of things. Mhm. Because when we were speaking a couple of weeks back about adapting novels in particular, right? Um, it depends on how a novel is set out, right? In the case of like something that involves travel or travel across a whole world, um, how you would set up an interactive experience that like readers of the story could then go and experience themselves in the real world. It depends on how that piece is written, right? So if we were talking Dan Brown Angels and Demons, all of that is set in Rome. And so you could pull out pieces from an entire book to do essentially a visit this place, learn about all the research that Dan Brown did, um, uh, stand in the spot where the characters were standing, stand in the spot where the movie was filmed, blah 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 blah. Right. So you could do all of that. You could pick that from a whole bunch of places in Angels and Demons, and you wouldn't have to chronologically follow those pieces. You could follow them in the loop that made the most sense because you could piecemeal pick them out of the story, right? Um, and then so the same question would be around this particular piece where, like, okay, so it sounds like the author is taking you across the world. So, like, what could be collected together, if anything, right? Was like, do they visit multiple places in a single city? Do they visit something that would make a great train trip with two or three stops, right? Because particularly in like the Europe, for example, the Euro rail is a very easy thing to kind of get a pass for and hop around on. Um, and then what do you want it to be, right? Is it that people want to learn more about the research that the author did, or that they want to eat the food that the author ate if you're going on an eat, pray, love kind of a, experience, right? Like a lot of people went to Italy to go to the place where Elizabeth Gilbert went to eat food and all of those kind of things, right? Where they sat down in the cafe that she talked about and ate the dinners that she talked about. And, so, um, uh, so like those are kind of your first questions is there enough detail for any one place to make a standalone experience? So that's your first question. And then the next question is what sort of interaction are you imagining with your readers? So is that a nonfiction one where you're like, hey, I did a bunch of research for this book, right? And so like let's let them know about the history that I discovered that didn't make it all into the story, right? Or is it like an experience thing? Like I am really obsessed with food and like these are my top eateries and these are the things that I would do and like, and so you could visit the places that the characters had their thing and so you could listen to a little bit of dialogue from the book where the characters have their key conversations while eating the food just for a bit of fun, right? So like you could do like those kind of things as well. Or if the key point of the story, and obviously, this is a story that you are editing and I don't know a ton about, but like if the magic walking stick is like trying to lead you on a journey of self discovery, maybe it takes you to an uh, a mosque, a Jewish temple, a church, blah, 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 where you hear the different philosophies of these different people and you encounter spiritual beings at each stop that change your life in some way, or you happen to perform a small kindness for a person along your route, or, like those kind of things, right? And so then that goes into the more entertainment aspect of that, where you are stepping into um, the shoes of the person who maybe has found that cane in a store or has had their grandfather die. And so you take your grandfather's cane on an adventure to the places that he told you about, or like whatever that might be, right? Oh, so as in like he as a writer could do similarly to what you have done, have partnerships with the person that they traveled around the Greek islands with and the hostel that they stayed in and blah 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 blah. Where essentially the experience is also an affiliate um, partner experience in a way where you're sending people to business partners based on the um, popularity of your work. Mm. Yeah. And it honestly depends on um, star power, right? I suppose, right? As to who you could or couldn't partner with to do what thing, right? So, like, if you are a Dan Brown, you could probably go to a airline like Air Canada or Southwest or Delta or whatever it is, and be like, yo, you do a bunch of flights to Rome. I'm looking for a sponsor to talk about more of the content that I researched or whatever. Do you want to sponsor this story? And I talk about you. To like, okay, you are someone who's maybe um, slightly less in the star power realm initially when you start out. So, like, there would have been a time when Elizabeth Gilbert wrote her books where she wasn't as famous as she is now, right? And um, and in those early days where like that book is gaining traction and those kind of things, you might go to the as I said, like the maybe like a tour bus around Italy and a B&B tour company in India and luxury hotel chain in Bali, right? And be able to kind of leverage that to someone who maybe is a much more niche in their piece where they um, make a particular kind of smaller area famous. Like I'm thinking like the young adult books, the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and I'm pretty sure like one of them goes to Greece. Or I don't know whether I'm confusing that with Mamma Mia. I can't remember, but one of them was like Greek islands, right? And so like partnering with like smaller businesses like little Airbnbs and like little transfer boats and those kind of things, right? Where you could um, do that as well, right? So you do have that. You can definitely have that very business minded, like you leverage your kind of um, star power in a way, um, or like your ability to kind of be able to do that. But I think that the easier way is to more ask yourself not like um, who I could partner with initially, but the people who read my novels and enjoy them and then happen to be in this area of the world, what is another way that I can re-engage them, right? Mm. Yeah, okay, so they're essentially more going to a travel company and being like, I have this offering that may be of interest to, you know, people in that location. Would you include it in this in-flight magazine slash allow me to give you a flight, a slash whatever, right? Hmm. Yep. Mhm. Mm. Yeah, 100% right. 100%. Yeah, and like in in those kind of um case is a lot of the time the way um, it acts as like a marketing piece for your book, right? Um, you're going to the Greek islands and you're interested in XYZ thriller, romance, blah, 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 blah. Hey, here's something that you can do while you're there. Plus, hey, why not grab the book and read the book while you're in the area where it was, you know. Um, and like with most kind of, travel companies and those kind of things, like content is really king in that, right? Like if you were a good writer and you have made an extra level of fun, an amazing race style thing that you can do while you're island hopping in Greece or whatever, um, um, you could write a guest blog post which could be used on, you know, the travel agency I'm thinking of at the moment is Flight Centre. I don't know if that is big in North America as it is in Australia, but like Flight Centre or G Adventures or like Katiki or whatever, and you go to their marketing team and you're like, hey, here is a fun thing that um, that people could do while they're on your tour, and I've made like a blog post if you are interested in using it, because then it gives them fresh new content that brings them up on Google and all of those kind of things, right? So it's content marketing in essence, and they are more likely to publish that on a blog if the experience that you have on something like Story City is free. But the idea behind having that free Story City experience is so that you can send them to the book to purchase the book, right? So like it's essentially like a lead, like what they say is like a lead magnet for a book. So like reviews act as lead magnets. So like having a good review policy in place, blog posts act as good lead magnets, and then interactive experiences like what you can build using like a no-code tool like Story City is also a lead magnet where you're leading with experience to sell a piece of content, you're leading with a blog to sell a piece of content, you're leading with reviews to sell a piece of content, right? Um, and and even like because even as you're making things for a digital experience that someone could do in the real world, right? Like so even as you're making that kind of content, then that content could then be repurposed for social media, for YouTube shorts, for TikTok videos, for like if you're going the way of like um talking about particular places, like you can do like reviews for those places on book talk and those kind of those kind of hashtags on social. um um so it sort of kind of allows you to do adaptions in a bunch of different ways. Yeah. But in terms of like including a magic walking stick in the same way that you would include a pair of traveling pants that bring good luck. Um, it can be you can always do kind of like a close third person kind of narrative where you take people through and they meet people who tell you about the history or tell you about a local legend or those kind of things. And the cane in your hand always burns when you're close, like or gets warm whenever you're close to a place that has good food or whatever, right? So you can always make those kind of little cute, you know oh. Yeah, it's amazingly a number of people who will kind of like start a book or a story or a whichever because they kind of want to, you know, leave something behind, like leave something for like their family to connect with parts of their life in an interesting way, right? You know, um, and sometimes people do that as a book, sometimes people do that as a scrapbook, sometimes people do that as like, interviews or whatever that might be. Um, but this is an interesting way that you can do it as well, right? Um, my parents have a bunch of like uh, old school like film slides, like um, um, rather than photographs, they had a camera that took slides or negatives that could be then put into a slide machine. And so we digitized a lot of that, right? And so there are a lot of like projects that I hear people talking about where they're like, oh, yeah, we've got these old slides and I want to show people, where this was taken so they can compare what it used to look like to what it looks like now and how things have changed. And, we used to live here and all of those kind of things, right? So,
Yeah, I was just watching, I don't know if you've seen it yet, this documentary on Pamela Anderson that
mhm,
just came out. And it was interesting because, her life, her and first husband, Tommy Lee, their motley crew,
mhm,
they filmed absolutely everything.
mm,
And that actually turned out to be, when I was a kid, it totally destroyed her career, like,
mm,
but it was just interesting to see. And then she had all these notes, notebooks of journals she would write about certain people. So her whole life was basically told
mm.
by her and her husband and the family. And it was just interesting to see how they did that, and then how the third party, like, who didn't even consult them to see if they were okay with telling their story. They just made this film, and it was interesting to see how she felt about her own content, like the way it got put out there,
Mm.
and what somebody else thought about her and how she felt about that. So that
Yeah,
was fascinating. It was kind of convoluted.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, like these kind of, like a lot of documentaries are about um, taking back your story, right? In a lot of ways, um, and like a lot of people will like go to Graceland and visit all of the Elvis Presley related things, but you can imagine how powerful it would be if Elvis had the ability to tell his own story in this interactive way, where he could talk about the places that changed him and the events in his life that changed him and all of those kind of things, right? And
Yeah,
um, um, I think that there is some real interesting um, things that you could do as a result, particularly in documentary, right? Along with like interactive kind of locations. Um, and um, yeah, I think that's what's exciting about this new kind of media. Um, because like even just thinking about recently watching the doco series about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and them talking about essentially giving their side of events and stories and telling the story and taking back their narrative. Not everyone has the kind of star power that they or Pamela Anderson or whatever need to have like a docu series done in Netflix, but this kind of formats and these kind of tools and technology and platform does allow for people who to take back their narratives, even if they don't have this the star power to get themselves a whole crew around it.
our spokesmodel,
mm,
and that led to, the Playboy edition.
mm,
I can't just sneak through on the bus with a big passport,
mm,
and then just start working in Playboy, and got Letter Day watch, and the rest is history.
mm,
But it's like, geez, Carmen, I was just a normal kid with a nice clean face.
mm.
And I think, like, when you think about star power, or think of someone like Mr. Beast, and he's, I don't know, the fourth highest grossing movie on YouTube.
Mm.
And again, he just started out, he tested people that had crafted an algorithm to, I don't know, high content creators on YouTube, and he tested them until they gave him the support he needed to do his thing.
Mm.
But he spends like months preparing for videos, and it just becomes this big thing because he spends that much time creating his content.
Mm.
He
Yeah.
spends 4 months creating his one video.
Mm. And a lot of time, like uh, star power doesn't necessarily equate to the ability to get things made either. Hollywood is notorious for being very white and all of those kind of things, and not necessarily green lighting projects that do portray a different viewpoint of a particular thing, right? Um, and so, you know, you get a lot of the traps where, like, certain areas of a city will get a bad name because the media puts out all of their negative stories, and so like technology like this can allow a community to reclaim the stories around their community and their spaces and those kind of things, right? When they can't get a voice in traditional places.
I think, and I've heard this from a lot of content creators, there's this mythos around celebrity,
Mm,
and almost a fear around it. Like one guy said to me, he's like, "Oh, you're not going to get the kind of leverage you want,"
mm,
and it's kind of, he just assumed that was true.
mm.
And it's like, and then I think about someone like Mr. Beast. There was an article, I can't remember who he was talking to, but he basically said, and once you learn what goes viral, it's very easy. You just have to learn what it is. So he sat there down in front of the camera and counted to 100,000.
Mm,
And that was his first viral video.
mm.
And that's his foundation for the rest of what he does. But I think certain people have an understanding of what it is that works, and they can duplicate it.
Mm.
And then they teach other people, and they start getting thousands of dollars. These people have it duplicated so they can like do the most outrageous thing you can possibly imagine
Mm.
and create a story around it.
Mm.
And of course, you have to be careful because shock value only lives so long.
Yeah.
Like, I look at Mr. Beast, and he plateaued about 2 years ago. Now, he's still got a third of a million. It's not like he's suffering, but he's kind of just hit this thing where now he's just kind of coasting.
Mm.
And again, when you have like over a million followers, coasting isn't too bad.
Yeah, and I think that I think that that's a good point when you're talking about interaction with audiences, um, and re-engaging people with your content, right? Because particularly when you're an independent creator, um, it is difficult to be a content machine in the way that people consume content. We consume content so much quicker than we can make it. And Most writers would be able to manage like writing a book in a year. Um, and, we read like, I know that I read probably like a book a week, right? Um, and so when you look at um, building that audience and building a following for your content, it's not going to be a forever growth machine, right? Like if you, so the YouTube channel that I watch the most is John and Hank Green, right? The Vlog Brothers. And their videos, like if you go consistently back through their videos, the majority of those videos have between like 150 to 200,000 views, right? They have their niche of nerd fighters, they call them, where they have like a significant reach and they have a significant impact. And many of their videos will go into the millions of views and those kind of things, but like their regular day to day, week to week content um, is in that like 150 to 200K range, right? And um, and so John and Hank are not like they create an insane amount of content, but even they cannot create the amount of content that like their audience wants to consume, right? And so like a lot of the question comes up is like, how do you re-engage people, right? And in a way that doesn't necessarily have you having to make new content to do that re-engagement. And so some people will do that via merchandising and having things that people can wear to kind of show that they belong to this group of people who are inside jokes on that type of content, right? To like they might sign up for like a live show, like podcasts that will do like live shows that that they'll tour the country for. um, but like things like interactive stories that like where people can step into the content that you've made and follow a path that you have around a city or learn more about the research that you did in a particular area or those kind of things. There's just another way to re-engage, right? Because it's not realistic to think that you are going to grow your audiences forever and a day. Like once you get established, you will have a certain audience that you are essentially talking to. And so, if you don't want to burn yourself out as a creator, what are the different ways that you can adapt content so that it allows people to interact with it or revisit it in a different way?
And one thing I was thinking about is like, oh geez, what was it? I have about three thoughts in my head right now, and I can't remember this one. Um, so when we backtrack a bit, we were talking about content, talking about the celebrity kind of mindset, creating a follow, how
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
And then how do you create that time if you just learn that a concept that you want to put the genesis of it first? Just like, hey, hold on, take care of yourself, come back for the show tonight. Thank you for your contribution to the whole.
Mm,
Because to me, that's like the ideal pet relationship.
mm. I was having a chat to someone recently where and that kind of puts me in mind actually of like mobilizing people as well, right? Like, so if you think of uh, BTS and how they essentially have like their fan base kind of considers themselves like kindness warriors in a way, right? And thinking like, okay, you as a content creator, how are ways that you can kind of mobilize your um, fans for good as well, right? Like if like BTS could do interactive things like invite people into the music videos that they made so that they could see the places where they made them, and they could do like live performances which people could come and visit like the famous venues that they'd done these live performances and kind of like get a feel, immerse themselves in the video in that place, like so they could do all of those things that you might as a content creator might want to do. But then like you could do something like um if your fan base considers themselves kindness warriors, like it creating a like 5 or 6 stop like kindness tour where like you get people to leave positive messages behind for strangers and draw rainbows in the sidewalk, or leave donated clothes in a park for somebody to pick up, and do that in every city as part of the launch for a new album, as part of the launch for a new concert, as part of like the kindness day that happens as part of like UN's global dignity, or like whatever that might be, right? So you can also use this kind of technology to spread that kind of um,
Mm-hmm.
goodness across the world, right?
Yeah, it makes me think of. Have you ever heard of a movie and a book called Confess?
No.
So it's the premise of the story is people write lines anonymously, and then they slip it through this mailbox slot, like those cards you just don't grab, put it in, and it falls on the floor. So the person will write a secret, and then the artist goes through all those different secrets, and he paints them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel I
And
have heard of this project actually.
it's a movie. Um, it's a fictional story, and I like the concept. It was written. Book, book and the movie was really well done.
Mm,
But I don't say that a lot. And it's a really it's a lot of story, and it's romantic, it's rom com drama.
Yeah, 100%. Um, yeah, those are all kind of, interesting concepts. And I think that a lot of people think about um, telling those stories in traditional ways. And but I also think that how much more powerful is it if you can give people an experience that they can literally step into and experience that for themselves, right?
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
And then one other thing I was thinking about, because me and my business partner Glenn were talking about, because he's writing this alien. He was thinking of making it into a board game. I was like, why don't we make it into what is after Choose Your Own Adventure?
Mm,
Because it is aliens who know about time travel, and
mhm,
these aliens kidnapped his first his character, and then we were talking about, okay, how do you turn that into interactive choose your own, because it is time travel. The whole premise of it is the trouble of time.
mhm,
And like, if you change this reality, is it going to change the other reality? And yeah, that's okay. And then we started saying, okay, let's choose your own adventure, and what's the result of that choice?
mm,
And one question we had is like, could you turn that into a multiplayer environment
mhm.
where, one person makes this choice, another person makes this choice, and gets the result?
And so essentially a almost like a sliding doors moment in a way is
Yeah.
yeah, where depending on the chosen gender, race, age, etc. of your initial characters that you're presented with, you get a different backstory, and therefore you change the questions that you have. 100%. Like that's very. It sets up a more, I suppose, like complex adventure. Um, but it does allow you to play with experience, right? Because I knew a creator who did essentially like a choose your own theater piece where she had 4 acts, and at the end of each act, you chose whether or not you wanted some like who you wanted to die. You had to vote for who you wanted to die in that
Oh,
like area in that thing. You only got 1 token, so you had 3 places where you could use it, but you could only use it once. And so she essentially was playing with the idea of judgment, right? You made the judgment that that person was a bad person, therefore they should die. But at the next round, it's then revealed a little bit more of their backstory, a little bit more of their motivation, a little bit more of why they were doing the thing they were doing or snapping back at the person or whatever, right? And so it was a play on the idea of judgments and you not knowing everybody's backstory, you not knowing the complexities that go into that backstory, and you making judgments really quickly and writing people off because of it, right? Um,
right.
and not having those conversations and grace around the idea that people make mistakes and that they're human and like all of those kind of things, right? Um, and
Yes.
when is someone um, so set in their mindset that they're never ever ever going to change, right? They're like so right wing or left wing that you just cannot talk them down from a position. Or when is it that they've had a bad day, something's happened to them beforehand that's colored their view, like all of those kind of things, right? And so that makes for a very interesting choose your own adventure because you might be presented with the same um, elements, but that might put you on the different side of a conflict, right? That might put you on
Yeah.
the different side of a conversation because of something that happened to you. Um,
Is it, yeah, like, is it possible, let's say, me and Glenn, I make one choice, he makes another choice, is there a way of, like, because are these choose your own adventures, are the single player, or
well, like you can set them up to be as many plays as you want.
oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah. So you can set them up to be as many plays as you want, right? In that, like um, give people the choice as to who they are going to be or what choice they're going to make. And then essentially you then link them out into different um, chapters, right? And so if you think about like the chapter list in Story City, for example, where it has just a list of all of the chapters that you could potentially visit in that choose your own adventure. And so one of the first choices would be, do you make choice X or choice Y? And so choice X might be the choice that you would make, and choice Y would be the choice that Glenn would make. And then the story would change depending on what happened. And so you might appear as characters in each other's stories as you go through, right? Um, um, Particularly to get an interest for, she seemed so level-headed in that first chapter, and now at the end of this particular branch, like she's setting fire to things. Like, what would make a person do that? And you'd be like, oh, well, if I went back and chose her, like you put a suggestion at the end of that branch, being like, hey, do you want to know what radicalized Marguerite? Why don't you go back and pick her thing, right? Pick her trail. And so you would just and so like you could visit all the literal same locations. You could turn up to, like, if we took, for example, like a protest, you could turn up at the same protests in the same places, but you would essentially just do a different chapter for those different points of view. Um, and then you would, so they could be in the same location, but it's just that if you picked Marguerite's uh, choice at the start, or if you picked Glenn's choice at the start, you would be presented with different content, right? Um, and then the way that you link those together is that in the chapter connections, you can choose what is the next story, like what is the next chapter that you link to, right? And so that's how you build that out.
Cool. That's a lot to think about. It's what I'm discovering as I'm kind of going through the different steps. And then also, like, my list where I start thinking choose your own adventure, but then I'm like, this doesn't really work for this type of story.
Mm. Yeah, it will. Yeah, so yeah, the format depends on what type of story you can make. The type of stories you have depend on what sort of interactive kind of things you can build. It all kind of loops back into that. But anyway, Marguerite, we are now at 5 p.m.
Yeah, yeah, I could probably do this all day.
Well, it's a good
All day
thing
fun.
that we are here every week, every Monday at 4 p.m. MST time, um, or 10 a.m. if you live in the Australian Asian parts of the world. So we can come back here for another round next week. So thank you for
Yeah,
joining us. For those of you who are listening in or watching the replay, hopefully you got at least some inspiration or some ideas or thoughts from this conversation, and can come to a future Monday brainstorming session with your own questions and thoughts and ideas to play around and percolate with, whether it's a novel, a short story, an interactive project, film. The idea is just to kind of percolate about stories and telling stories and the different ways that you can do that, right? And so that's every Monday. We also have an adventure hour every Thursday or Friday evening every week with a creator. We do a real life choose your own adventure. We kind of bring a street view up because all of these adventures that are on Story City are actually in real places. So we get to look around a real place and do a bit of armchair traveling while at the same time being the hero of our own adventures. So please do come and join us. But until then, becoming a creator on Story City is free. About.storycity.app if you're interested in finding out more. And thank you, Marguerite, again for joining us this week. And we'll see you again next week. Beautiful. Ciao.